Whakatakata hau ki te uru whakatakata hau ki te tonga ki a mākina ki uta ki a mā tarakitai. E hea ki ana te atakura, he teo, he hoka, he hauhu, a tihei mauri ora. Tēnā koutou e nā kai kaunihera mō te rohi o Waitaha. Nei rā te mihi kia korua, Nigel, Neil, kei te mihi kia korua. Koutou mā e nā memo o te hāpori e mā taki nei. Tēnā koutou, ki nā tangata ka hara mai i tō wero ki a mātou, tēnā koutou, ki a koe Colin, te tuatahi, tēnā koe, kia ora koutou. So just acknowledging, opening up our meeting with Karakia and also acknowledging our councillors here, our mayors actually, from Ashburton and Timaru, who are on our panel today, and also to those who may be watching on the live stream. And of course, those that are coming in to do their submissions, and we've got Colin Meurk here to do the first one. But just opening up, welcome to this meeting. So we've had Karakia. We're going to hear submissions on our regional public transport plan for 25 to 35. We've got a quorum. We do have apologies that I'll get to in a moment from Mayor Black from Huranui. But happy to declare the meeting opened. And as I've said, we've got a live stream going, so that's going to be available it is available on our website now. So we'll get into it. Let's get to apologies, like I said. So we've got an apology from Mayor Murray Black, and that's the only other member of our panel, but the quorum is there with three of us. Any conflicts of interest? No, assuming not. Cool, good. So we can go to item number 4, which is election of a hearings panel chairperson. We've obviously assumed it at the moment, but we've got to pass a resolution for that. So the resolution would be to put a name in there. Mayor Brown, Mayor Bowen, you got any suggestions on that?
Yeah, I'm happy to nominate yourself, Chair Pauling.
Cool. And I've got a seconder for that?
Second that.
Cool. So we'll put Councillor Pauling or Chair Pauling or whatever you want to do in that gap. And we've got a mover and a seconder. I'm assuming there's no other discussion needed. So I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? That's carried. Cool. Thanks, everybody. So that's that. And then we're going to go to 5.1, and that's on page 9 of our agenda. And this is just to confirm the submissions we've received on the public transport plan. So you'll see that there on page 9. So the resolution that we have is to receive Len, you want to come up and speak to that? Sorry, Len. You come up and speak, and then we'll get to the resolution after that.
I was happy that you took it as read, actually, Chair. Essentially, with the process, this is a paper to run through a bit of the process of what the committee's for, and just to give you a wee reminder that this is a parallel process. Greater Christchurch Partnership have been running the hearings panels over yesterday and the previous Monday that dealt with the Greater Christchurch proportion of the regional public transport plan. We've had over 800 submissions on the plan itself, written submissions, but there were a number that came from, I think there were 62 or 64 odd from Timaru that looked at things like the My Way process. There were 4 from Ashburton, for example, and a few others from around the broader Waitaha, Canterbury region. So this this committee, the Regional Transport Committee, is dealing with the broader Canterbury ones. There's paragraph 10 there is just a wee bit of clarification that panel members can ask questions of clarification through the chair, but cannot cross-examine or debate submissions, and no decisions on the submissions presented at the hearings are made at this meeting. The next steps are obviously on 9th of December. The panel will be reconvened to consider deliberations on what you hear today. So, that's essentially the nature of the beast of what we're dealing with today, and the recommendation is up there as the Chair Pauling suggested.
Kia ora, thanks, Len. Any questions, Nigel or Neil? No, all good. Cool. Well, we've got our resolution on the screen there. So that's to receive the verbal submissions that are in our document here as well, the one. So mover, Mayor Brown, and seconded by Mayor Bowen. Assuming we don't need any discussion either, so all those in favour, please say aye. Any against? That's carried. Thank you. So that moves us on to our submitters. And, of course, just as as normal, we've got 10 minutes for each submitter. So, Colin, welcome to the table. You're first up. And so, like I said, 10 minutes. And it's great to have you here, Colin. Read your submission, and it's going to be good to hear from you and ask any questions of clarification. So you got 10 minutes, and I think we've got a timer here. And so at about 1 minute to go, we'll ring the bell if we need to, and then we can ask any questions after that. So I'll hand it over to you. Kia ora, welcome.
Kia ora koutou, ko Colin Meurk, representing myself and Creative Transitions to Sustainable Futures. I've got 3 main points that I wish to make, which were included in my written submission. The first relates to commuter rail proposition. The second relating to the pet issues on public transport. And the third, briefly, on bus subsidies in the city, particularly as it affects university students and staff. So firstly, I wish to make the point that to some extent, the South Island has been sort of hollowed out by successive governments in terms of investment in public transport. I can't imagine the number of billions of dollars spent in Auckland and Wellington. We're really missing out here. It's our turn, and this has a huge influence on our regional and economic power and political power in the South. So I believe there's a huge opportunity to build a light commuter rail arc from Amberley in the north around to Ashburton in the south. I call it the AAA proposition, the arc from Amberley to Ashburton. And I believe that this should be done almost immediately. We can use second-hand light rail options, or pick them up from elsewhere until, a fully funded operation can be brought into existence. And I believe we should also be re-implementing the passenger service from Picton to Bluff. And this kind of relates to the fact that, those satellite towns in that arc between Amberley and Ashburton are some of the most rapidly growing urban environments in the country. And it's partly because, the attractiveness of this part of the country. And we should be sort of emphasising and celebrating that and helping to reinforce it. There's incidentally a business forum going on either yesterday or today, which was looking at how to improve the kind of performance of the region, and I think this is one of the critical aspects to that. Okay, my second point relates to pets. There's a huge amount of attention being given to pets at the moment, and it's understandable that there are clearly many people derive well-being from furry fur babies, but the unintended consequences of these are that they have a huge environmental and carbon footprint. Second, they have a disastrous impact on New Zealand wildlife, especially ground-dwelling endangered species. And third, there are many people that actually have phobias or allergies to furry animals. And so the idea of, there's been a very strong marketing of the value of pets without considering some of these consequences. I would somewhat sort of aspirationally suggest that, New Zealand should be moving towards a more ecologically literate approach to pets. We should all have pet kiwi, weka, kakapo, takahi, or kaka and kia, rather than dogs and cats. and this would do a huge amount for our identity with our natural environment and our wildlife, as well as reducing the carbon footprint of many of our introduced species, mammals. So there is a drastic need for more ecological literacy among New Zealanders, visitors and immigrants. If there was going to be a proposition to put pets on buses and trains, they should be confined and put into one very specific part of those so that they don't interfere with other people who have maybe totally different attitudes to these animals. And finally, I just want to note, I was talking to Simon Kingham about the increased use of public transport by university students and staff. And, this is to some extent part of the attractiveness to Canterbury of students. This is going to be supported by maintaining low cost of living, including subsidies on public transport. So I would just sort of argue that, that needs to be, maintained. So that's all I've got to say. Happy to take any questions.
Kia ora, Colin. Thank you for that. Any questions from our panel? No? Colin, in terms of your point's well made about Canterbury and the South Island not getting much from the National Land Transport Fund. That's something that is not lost on us, and we're definitely working together to try to do something about that. So your point's well made. I don't have any particular questions about the rail one, but in terms of the pets on buses, your idea about moving them to one part of the bus or having a particular area, I think that's a good suggestion. I don't have any particular question. I just think that's good to throw into the mix of how it could work, because I understand that it's only small dogs that it's been proposed for, and with muzzles as a must on that. So hopefully that alleviates the issues that has for people. I don't know if there's been any thought about where they go in the buses, but that could be something that, and I can definitely follow up on that and ask our staff when that comes back to us about how that would be managed. So I think it's a good point. Yep, Neil.
Thanks, Colin, for your submission. There's a question on the Ashburton, the arc from Amberley to Ashburton. What route did you think it would take?
If it was like rail commuter service, it would be along the rail lines that join those places to Christchurch. So I'm talking about commuter light rail into Christchurch. Some people now currently commute by car that distance every day, and I think it's a great opportunity to build the kind of connection between those fast-growing satellite towns. With the central hub here.
Using the existing rail.
Yes, definitely.
Using the existing rail network.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. Yes, I think, we should be looking how to use the existing resources and to do things as economically as possible. I'm against gold plating everything. Let's use what resources we can and, get, there's probably second-hand rail sources, from up north that could be brought down. I don't know the details of that, but, those things should be explored.
Thank you. Any other questions? Hey, thanks, Colin. Thanks very much for your submission. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you for the opportunity.
Kia ora, Colin.
Great work you're all doing.
Thanks, Colin. Our next submission is Jan, and I can see Jan online there. Thanks for zooming in to us. So as before, like I said to Colin, and I think you heard that, 10 minutes, and we'll ring a bell if you get close to that, and then we'll ask any questions that we may have. So I'll hand it over to you, Jan. There you go.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it's not too bad.
Thanks.
I think we're going to turn it up just a little bit in here, but thank you.
Okay, hi. Yeah, good morning. I'm Jan Finlayson, Chair of the Geraldine Community Board, and thanks for the chance to submit on this process. And I would like to say the board endorses the Timaru District Council and Pleasant Point and Temuka Community Board submissions on this. Geraldine itself is has got some special circumstances demographically and geographically. most particularly, we were surprised 3 years ago. Well, I think we'd already suspected, but surprised to find how our age differs from the median nationally. So our median is nearly 50. Nationally, it's 37.4, and nearly 30% of our township's population is aged 65 and over. Nationally, it's 15.5. We have generalist health services here in Geraldine, but not specialist. So that sees a lot of our folk having to go to Timaru for hospital and other specialist care. But of course, there are people here who are no longer able to drive. They need care, specialist care, but they still are able to live in their homes or under some more minor level of care. So anyway, about 30 years ago, nearly, our Geraldine Community Vehicle Trust was set up, and partly in response to that, but also, as I understand it, because a public transport service which had come through here no longer did. It's become a kind of a glue for the community. It's a critical kind of a glue. There are plenty of things, but that's one kind of glue that we are really reliant on. I'd say pretty much any time I go for a walk around Geraldine, I'll see a vehicle trust bus driving around. So on that vehicle trust, the purpose, the who, the money, the rides, it's a registered charity, and it's worth lingering on what it was set up to do. It's for the whole community, for Geraldine and our districts, particular transport for the disadvantaged and those without private cars, that should say, sorry, and for recreation and education of the young and the elderly, and to help keep the elderly remain in the community. I think we've got around 30 volunteer drivers, and a point of difference is these people. They are not hard to get. They are often retired people, and very often people who have benefited from the vehicle trust themselves. Our money, we're critically dependent on the ECAN money, $18,000. So we get about $8,000 from our small local businesses. They're primarily small, and sponsorship. And of course, we have some commercial use of our vehicles too, but just over $100,000 worth of net assets. We're a sniff of an oily rag, sort of a vehicle trust here. That is, as I said, critically dependent on that $18,000 contribution. The smooth running of our community depends in large part on the smooth running of the vehicle trust. So our submission on the plan, we would like to endorse the plan as having the general intent allowing affordable, enabling and expeditious public transport in Canterbury, and we'd really like to see that carry forward into the final plan. On specific policies for community vehicle trusts, a couple of things there. We do recommend that policy 1.5 should be adopted, but we take issue with a sub-point which is identified there. And that is, we reference a policy that, ECAN will provide financial support to approved vehicle trusts to help with costs of replacement and administration. We'll use the following criteria, and this is the bit that bothers us, that there is sufficient funding available in accordance with ECAN's funding policy for community-based organisations. So there we're referencing a policy that we have no power to comment on in this process, which does make it difficult for us. The point that we would make there, and that's our second recommendation, is that that relevant action subpoint should be removed because we feel that Geraldine citizens and ratepayers' rights to needs-based public transport should be the same as that of other Canterbury citizens. And the second policy we wish to comment on, 1.6, that's about total mobility services. Just generally, that 1.6 should be adopted. We like it. But we wanted to add that ECAN should proactively advocate to central government, as necessary, for at least the maintenance of total mobility qualifying criteria and subsidy levels. And that's really just because we believe strongly that it needs to continue. So that's the submission, folks. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Jan. Thanks for that. Any questions, Nigel or Neil? Nigel?
Yeah, just a clarifying one, probably for, and thanks, Jen. We really appreciate the submission. It's probably clarifying actually for officers. I'm interested to know, obviously the likes of My Way is targeted rate, but as far as the funding of the community-based All's Total Mobility, is that funded through general rate? What is the funding mechanism?
Len, are you able to help us with that? You can come to the table if you want.
Yeah, so it was around where does the funding come specifically for total mobility and
Sorry. Yeah, the total mobility money, there's partially it's paid for by Environment Canterbury, but there's a big proportion that is paid for through central government. So central government does fund total mobility. I think it's to the tune of, I think when you're looking at a per trip basis, it's 75% of the subsidies funded from central government, about 25 from ECAN from memory.
and then so the ECAN funding is general? Will it be general rate as opposed to it is
Sorry, it's all targeted rate. It all comes from targeted rates. We've got targeted rating areas set up for across Canterbury that cover community vehicle trusts, and also there's a bit that comes in for total mobility in each district as sort of to effectively pay for the costs of that service over the course of a year.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So to break down Timaru district as an example, with the likes of Point, Temuka, Geraldine, with having community vehicles, then targeted rate is across the district, or is it targeting the specific communities?
My understanding is it targets specific communities, and if you look at the rating for, say, a Geraldine, it'll be less than the rating per property in Timaru, because Timaru gets has a My Way service that costs a lot more.
Yeah, so it is proportionate. Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I understood it was specific targeted rates as well. So, yeah, any other questions, Neil? Do you have one?
Yeah, thanks for your submission, Jen. You talked about removing sub-point, whatever it was. I just missed the number. Could you just repeat that, please?
1.5, I think it is.
1 point.
That's right, Jen. Or the sub-point
Yes,
is policy
that is the
1.5.
bit, Yeah, that's the bit where it says ECAN will provide financial support to approved vehicle trusts to help assist with the costs of vehicle replacement and or administration and so on. And it's the bit where it references where there's sufficient funding available in accordance with ECAN's funding policy for community-based organisations. And that is from a separate policy that we have no power to submit on in this process, and makes us feel a bit vulnerable.
Yeah, and I can understand that, Jan. I think that funding policy might be through each LTP, long-term plan, sorry to use an acronym. So I believe that's right, but Len is nodding his head down there. So, yeah, so every time we do our long-term plan, the funding and financing policies get done. That's sort of pretty standard across most councils. So the detail of that policy is available for communities to submit on. But yeah, you're right. It's in a different consultation process in a different document. But it's good for you to know that, and also good for us to reflect on what you've said there. That's something that's out of your control in terms of this process. But we can get clarification around that through the process, I think, Jan, so that you're aware where that sits and when you should submit on that if you want to during those other long-term plan processes. But I get your point, totally. And I think on your other one about 1.6, you're reasonably happy, so that's good. I didn't have any other questions other than that, but just to acknowledge that we got those. You made your points really clearly about 1.5 and 1.6. So, thank you. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks, Jan.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Kia ora. And keep up your good work too in the community. Thank you. Next up is Tim. Is that who we've got down the back? Kia ora, Tim. Welcome to the table. Welcome to Environment Canterbury and to this hearing. So you've probably heard about 10 minutes. At 9 minutes, we'll ring the bell if you're getting close to that. If not, we'll just get into the questions after that. So thank you. Over to you, Tim.
Kia ora. Yes, I'm Tim Frank. Now, I do have to admit that I actually also made an oral submission to the Greater Christchurch hearing panels, because when I got the option of who should I talk to, I wasn't really sure, because the first part of my submission is really on the specifically focused on the Christchurch aspect, and the later part is more on a regional. So I thought I want to present to both. Now, just one of the things before I get to the later parts of my submission is one thing that I thought you might be interested in looking at a more regional perspective, and that's the what do we do from a competition viewpoint as far as the providers are concerned. Currently, we've got 2 providers in Canterbury and about 5 providers in the whole of New Zealand. So there has been a lot of consolidation in recent years. And to me, that seems a bit problematic because most of the providers are big international corporations nowadays. And so if you could design your contracts so that other providers can bid as well, so that it's not only 2 or something like that, so that a competition would be taken into account in letting contracts. So that's something I just wanted to put out there. Of course, New Zealand has a system where it's mainly through private providers, and that has its significant drawbacks, particularly in relation to controlling buses. So at the moment, for example, if a bus is delayed, the bus company just keeps on rather than skipping a few bus stops and actually, getting the best out of the system. So that's not really the best system that we have in New Zealand, because there's this contractual relationship, but no overall network that's considered. Okay, so then if we go to medium-term improvements, currently the mass rapid transit system for Christchurch has been what seems to have been delayed a little bit. What I really want to push here is the regional rail for the Canterbury and also linking into Otago. Now, on my previous submissions, I read in the summary later that staff have said, no, we've discounted regional rail. It's not what we want. Clearly, they have not read my submission because that's not what I said. I didn't talk about rail from Rolleston to Rangiora. I'm talking about regional rail. And it's quite common in overseas cities to have a metro service, which the mass transit would be, and then what's called in Europe is called S-Bahn or RER or Circunvías in Spanish. So where you have a regional rail system and that connects and also to the city, but also offers long distance quick trips within the city. So for that, our rail corridor would actually be ideal. You don't have to, it doesn't go to all the, for example, it doesn't stop in Riccarton and Upper Riccarton and something like that, but it connects quickly between the city to Hornby, skips everything in between, then to Rolleston, then out to Chertsey, Karakia, Ashburton, and so on. And for that, a regional rail system would be ideal, and the previous speaker talked about that. I just probably don't think light rail would be the best system, because light rail is more for shorter distances. It probably would be a regional rail service. That would be great. And what I would suggest as an initial step is actually a southern rail service together with the Otago Regional Council. Down in Dunedin, you've got Dunedin Railways, which is picking up again, which have got the operational expertise to do something like that, in contrast to Christchurch, where there's not much happening. And then later on, you could look at doing something bigger, slowly. And so the good thing with the rail service is that it can be built up slowly over time. You don't have to have the full system right there. Now, there's a frequent mention that the rail corridors are fairly full, particularly between Rolleston and Christchurch. That is true, but it's mainly because since the 1990s, so much rail has been ripped out and the signalling system hasn't been upgraded. So that can be built up slowly again to double tracks, or redo the double track that has been ripped out again, and upgrade the signalling system. And I note Kiwi Rail is already upgrading quite a bit of the signalling also in the South Island, so that's happening. You've got more things here. I would really prefer if, that would be integrated with bus services as well, for example, to Waimate or, to Geraldine, possibly, areas like that, so that it's not only good for residents, but also for recreation and visitors alike, and to make Canterbury really an attractive region. And really, I would challenge you to put that into the plan, even though you don't have a full business case yet, but motorways are actually built without a full business case already, and if something's just in the plan, that would be, that's something good. And certainly, I think from an international perspective, it's clear what's, more builds up a community more, train service or a new motorway or street. It's normally something like a rail service has more of a transformational impact. So that's my overall submission. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Kia ora, Tim. Any questions, Mayor Bowen or Mayor Brown?
Just have one question, clarification. You talk about the from Christchurch to Dunedin network, and you talk about Ashburton station would need some work to be usable again. Ashburton doesn't have a station.
Well, it's still got the platform. Yes, it does. It's still there. But it's currently, of course, it's got the adventure art, whatever the adventure shop right next to it. It would need, I'm not sure about the operator of, who owns that land. The platform is owned by Kiwi Rail, but it would need considerable upgrade. Yeah.
Cool.
You can travel south to Timaru and use our platform if you like.
Hey Tim, I can see that you've put a really lot of effort into the submission, and it's great to know that you presented to the Greater Christchurch Partnership panel as well. In terms of that thing that you said about putting it into the plan, so you're thinking about a aspirational sort of point in the plan about looking towards regional rail in the future. Is that what you mean?
Well, yes, I think at the very minimum, because I know, for example, in the Whakatau Regional Council, they have had, the Tuhuia connection in their plan for a couple of years before it became reality. So if it has to be in there, well before time, so that you can actually do something about it, I would think. And of course, that the last time a government promised regional rail for Christchurch, it was put back because apparently the regional council didn't ask for it. So it's it's your task. Maybe that was a political excuse, but it's your task not to give excuses to central government.
Cool, thanks, Tim. I don't think there's any other questions, so thanks for your time you've taken, and thanks for your comprehensive submission. Thank you.
Okay.
Next up, I think. So yeah, thanks a lot again, Tim. Next up, I think we've got Deputy Mayor of Ashburton, Liz McMillian, and Hamish Riak, the Chief Executive. But I think we're waiting for them online, and we're probably just ahead of time, so we can just take a quick. Well, they are logging in. Yeah, we'll just have a quick adjournment while we wait for them to come anyway. So it's 12:04 roughly on my watch. Same on yours, yep. Kia ora, Liz. Welcome here. Is it just you, or are we expecting Hamish as well, or just you presenting? Oh, sorry. Yeah, there you go.
Hi, Craig. Just me at this stage.
Kapai.
I can't
welcome.
hear you very well for
you
some
can't
reason.
Hear us? Okay. We'll give you a bit of a moment to see if you can.
Your volume.
You can. Is that better? We can yell as well.
Yeah. That seems to be a little bit better. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you really good.
Yep. And you're ready for me to start now?
Yeah. So you got 10 minutes, Liz, and if you're getting close to that, we'll ring a bell about 9 minutes. But other than that, we'll get into questions after that. So thank you. Oh, I've got 20 actually. Yeah, you've got longer. I remember that now. So yeah, you've got a bit longer.
I won't take that long.
All good. Thank you.
Okay.
We'll hand over to you.
Thank you. I'll just check the volume. Is that the volume? Okay. I'll get started. Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to the Ashburton District Council submission. My name's Liz McMillian. I'm the Deputy Mayor, but just also to note, I'm the Chairperson of our Community Vehicle Trust and also a board member of Safer Mid Canterbury. So the Ashburton District Council reinforce our strong support for the continuation of the Total Mobility Scheme and the Community Vehicle Trust within the Ashburton District. And we urge the committee to consider the findings of the research survey undertaken in partnership with Safer Mid Canterbury that shows some people who don't meet the criteria for total mobility or the Community Vehicle Trust are still in need of transport options. We also hope that you would include in the plan the possibility of more public transport options for Ashburton within the next 10 years. So the Total Mobility Scheme, we support the continuation of the scheme as covered by Policy 1.6 of the plan. This scheme is incredibly important as it assists those who are unable to drive and meet the criteria to meet their daily needs. And we note this service is becoming increasingly popular. In fact, I heard today of just one service having 100 clients who use the total mobility, and that's just one of the groups in Ashburton. Our Community Vehicle Trust, which is called the Mid Canterbury Connector, now uses 2 vehicles. So we own one which is based in Ashburton, and we have another one which we have a lease arrangement with that's based out of Karakia. We have around 14 volunteer drivers, and we average about 30 passengers a month. Most of those coming to Ashburton from either Methven or Karakia, and they're coming down for shopping, medical needs, and just to catch up with people. So it's definitely a great asset to town and is used by a lot of regular people. So they book in every sort of 2 weeks or so. We support the service being maintained in the Ashburton District as it provides a transport option for those who have no alternative, and it's essential for many in our community. So we're very happy to see this included in the plan under Policy 1.5. Earlier this year, we did a research survey to investigate the demand for public transport within the Ashburton Township. There was a moderate level for demand, and based on feedback, the most viable model would be a scheduled bus service with set pickups and drop-off points. The survey also highlighted that there are some in the district who would hugely benefit from a public transport service in the township. And those include our former refugees, so we are a refugee settlement town, and migrants, and the rural driving scheme, which we have, takes between 6 months to 2 years for those refugees and migrants to get their own driver's licences. So in that time, many are left in limbo. Those with disability or health issues who aren't eligible for Total Mobility Scheme would also benefit from this service. Last point, there is a lack of mention of Ashburton District other than the continuation of our 2 current options. in the plan, and it is a 10-year plan. So we would recommend that that you strongly investigate or introduce a new public transport option within Ashburton over the next 10 years, and we would like that to be mentioned into the plan. And that's all. I'm ready for questions. Thank you.
Kia ora, Liz. Thank you for that. Any questions, panel? I do have one, thanks. I don't think there is. Yeah, look, really strong points made. Thanks for supporting the plan around Policy 1.5 and the Total Mobility Scheme and the Community Vehicle Trust schemes. I think that's really good support, and point noted on the survey that's been undertaken and that sort of aspirational need in the future for Ashburton district in terms of public transport expansion. So just a question, so you sort of mentioned somewhere within the next 10 years you think that's important. How far away do you think that would be important to include something for Ashburton public transport, even if it was a trial or something? How far away do you think that would be?
Personally, I think a trial should be would be needed sort of sooner rather than later. So we would like to see something in the next sort of year or two in a trial. We realised that the My Way trial was about 2 years, I think. We have sort of talked about this, and 12 months to 18 months for a trial would possibly work. When the survey was put out, we did get some feedback from some local sort of private bus companies, wondering if they could do a round the town loop or something like that. So if we could get something like that underway, that would be great.
That's really good, Liz. And the other feedback was that it should be a scheduled service, so not really a My Way system, it's more of a scheduled service. Is that what the feedback was?
Yes, I think. Yeah, I think that's probably, there was a bit of feedback on people would like that service for obviously shopping, getting around town. I mean, Ashburton's quite spread out with Tynwald and then Ellington and sort of Hampstead, Netherby. So there's a scheduled service may work better than a My Way system.
Yeah, cool, thank you. Yep, Neil.
Thanks, Liz, for your submission. Do you have a taxi service in town? So why wouldn't people use a taxi service? Why do they need a bus service?
Hi, Neil. Thank you. We've got one taxi service in town, and that's used by a lot by the Total Mobility clients. It's also very expensive. One thing that was mentioned during the survey was that there's no Uber in Ashburton, and whether that would be something that could help with the public transport. But I guess most people wouldn't use a taxi service just because of the expense of it. Public transport is for people who probably can't afford a taxi. They just want to get down to the shop to get their milk, and if they can't drive, they're relying on friends and family to take them. So I think, we need something that's affordable for everyone.
Yeah, thank you. I had one more question, but I forgot what it was. But
I've got another one, and then you could come back to you.
Sorry, I'm leaning in because I can't hear very well.
Sorry, Liz, I'll talk a bit louder. So in terms of, so in the next year or two would be good, so that's something that we could consider. In terms of like how that could be tested with the Ashburton community, like through an annual plan process that we did, is that something that you would be open to?
Yes, I think so, yes.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, that was along the lines of my question. Would Ashburton Council be looking at putting a submission into Environment Canterbury's annual plan asking for a trial to start in the next financial year?
I think that would be the best way forward. Yes.
and in the initial stages put it into this public transport plan to get it in there to start with, and then the next step would be the annual plan.
Yeah, I agree.
Thanks.
Thanks, Liz. Nigel, you got another question?
No, look, the only thing I would give feedback on, I know it's more clarifying questions, but hey, we're councillors and we'll always go off the rule book, don't we? But it would be worth you going back to exploring what is the best option. And I would, with the way My Ways works so well in Timaru, I would actually think you'd be going backwards to have a commuter bus doing circles rather than that on-demand style network. And the challenge that we have and we need to test with central government is there an appetite obviously for more of those services, because they're extremely expensive both for community and government, and we need to explore that, because I know other areas in Canterbury are wanting those as well. But I just think we should do some work, and fully supportive of this approach for PT for Ashburton, but just on what is actually best for them, because I would say it's more a My Way type service. Yeah, but thanks, Liz.
Yeah, thanks for that comment, Nigel. I think My Way would be our ultimate option, but you just have to consider the cost of it.
Cool. Hey, thanks, Liz, and I think that's something that can be explored. So, thanks for your submission, and thanks for the background and the work in the survey that's been done. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Kia ora.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Kia ora, Jade. So just acknowledging that you're there. We did have another submitter, Chris, but we think that as we've contacted him, he's just travelling at the moment. So we'll come back to him after you. If you're ready to go, we'll get on with your one now. Are you happy to do yours now?
Okay.
Cool. So just
how's the sound?
What's that?
How's the sound?
Yeah,
how's the sound?
No, we can hear you really well. So you got 10 minutes, Jade, and thanks for being here.
Right.
And at about 9 minutes, if you're still going, we'll ring the bell, and then we can get into questions after that. So thanks, and away you go.
Okay. Thanks, Craig. Okay. So hello, everyone. I'm Jade from Ellesmere Bus Users and Supporters. So today I just wanted to do a bit of a submission to give some insight into rural community thinking on public transport, and lay down a bit of a challenge for the way the system is designed, and to think about what is not, what if we don't. Fact, there are a lot of commuters, and I believe that there is amongst residents a lot of interest in other transport options for a variety of reasons. It seems likely that this interest will grow as private transport becomes more costly, annoying and polluting. And let's not forget that some don't have access to private transport, like the young, those living with disability or the elderly. So this started because the 87 bus that was running from Southbridge to Lincoln was cancelled. That bus service did serve a group within the community, but there were significant issues with servicing the wider community and other community groups, for example, gold card holders. Remember that the 87 bus, it ran at 6:30 in the morning AM only on weekdays, and returned at 4 or 6 p.m. from Lincoln to Southbridge. So we've submitted a petition with about nearly 500 signatories to illustrate that there is community interest in a bus or public transport service, and importantly that the service needs to grow, change or adapt to make it more useful. And I like to define a problem. So I think I would say that the problem here is that rural and township people have no public or community transport option that's reliable, regular and readily accessible. And ECAN, who have operational power to do something about it, don't actually have a viable solution available to them either, and also possibly don't understand the users fully. So I'd like to challenge the way we've been thinking about this problem. Current solutions seem to be applied by scale of population density. For example, the trains that run in Wellington, which run for lots of commuters doing the same kind of journey. But actually, if we consider school buses, for example, they do the complete opposite of that. school buses do long routes, looping through country roads to make school available to those at distance, because they have the greater need and more difficulties to overcome in order to get to school. Whereas the people living near the school have more options like limes, bikes, walking, taxi, for example. So the cost and energy and effort goes into the more distant travellers, the more distant routes. This disproportionate investment is seen in quite a few systems. So I just wanted you to consider the example of lighting a fire, where we don't light a large chunk of wood. Instead, we spend time, energy, seemingly disproportionate, to cut up small and smaller pieces. The smaller, the more cuts and the more investment. But then in the end, the system functions and the fire can light because of those smaller pieces that you've invested time and energy into. So the community understands about limited resources, about busy council staff, about rules, regulations and funding, etc. But what we don't understand is how we can all be looking at the same issue of too many cars on the road, environmental pollution, stress, congestion, logistical difficulties, and no one can come up with a viable way to address it. Rural and township people are making journeys, and surely there's a way to help some of them do this in a collective way. So after some meetings and some consultation, I'm convinced that the application of a city bus type model will always fail. That is because it needs to be scaled down to meet the available ECAN resources. But scaling it down prevents too many of the potential users from using it. It is simply too hard for many of us to organise our lives around catching the one and only bus. We have to sacrifice sport after school, or we have to sacrifice staying in Christchurch on Friday nights, things like that just make it too difficult for a lot of people. So you can see that there's nothing in the middle there. There's a city bus model that works for city people, and then there's country people, and there isn't something in between, so there's a gap. And yet the travel, the commute, the journeys are being made by many people, and they're all steering in the same direction, using hours of their time to transport. And that represents a huge investment in time and subsequently dollars. And the reality is that other systems do exist. They're just hard to find. For example, Selwyn Community Bus, which is transporting school kids from Springston and Lincoln to Christchurch. This is a parent-run enterprise that charters a bus and charges members for seats on the bus. It requires a huge amount of organisation and investment by the organisers, but it saves all of the parents in terms of their time driving their kids, and it is cheaper over the whole year. It has been running for 3 years now and is quite an inspiration. Since we have recognised that the city bus model doesn't work well for us, we need to look at alternatives, and we need to look at them together with the community and ECAN, I believe, in order for it to work, in order to find something that fills that gap in the middle. So providing a chunk of wood and saying, there, now burn, doesn't work, as we've seen. So we need to kind of like reach in from both directions, cut up those little pieces and make something work, like the fire. So as councillors and staff, you might feel like it's outside of your power and that there aren't enough resources, but what you need to remember is that the community are looking to you as the leadership and the agency with the power to make a solution happen. And also the community have a lot to offer. So we know that funding cuts mean that less is possible from your end. So maybe don't spend heaps of dollars on a standard public transport system that we know isn't going to work. Maybe spend it on building support systems to help community-based schemes get off the ground. So invest in helping to know your community user groups. Invest in working with what you have, so use the interest, capability and potential of the community and the users, and focus on support, not control. And I've got an example here that we don't need flash swipe card systems that probably cost a lot of money. We would rather have a membership scheme and an honesty system, and although that might not work for city type buses, we are a different user group because we're a community, and we can have a more self-regulating system, and we are ourselves kind of owners of the system and organisers or invested in our solutions. An example of this is the Ellesmere Community Care. They have like a minibus that's available. It's a community-run initiative for the community, but unfortunately it doesn't have capacity for regular commutes for school users and commuters to work. So I believe a different and new solution is required at the rural and township level that is yet to be recognised and supported effectively by ECAN and central government. In my mind, a hybrid system is needed at this rural township level where ECAN can provide support and the community provide manpower and volunteers to come up with a system that works. And because if we don't, congestion gets worse. The cost appearance worsens as it does for the disabled and elderly. The health benefits of not driving are lost. I've taken the bus a lot. I can attest to the dramatically reduced stress of not driving. It's quite nice. And I'm deeply saddened by the loss of the 87 bus. So also our visitors to the area have no connection to the airport or Christchurch. The waste of our time, energy and money will continue to grow. The cost of the environment, which cannot speak for itself, continues to grow. Emissions into the air all around us, resources, space, pollution, disrupted connections to plants, animals and ecosystems. I'm sure you've heard that before. So rural and township users have a larger proportion, a larger quotient of these motivating factors because we make longer journeys. Our transport decisions are more than just a pop to the shop type choice. We consider in detail what we're going to do for our transport. And we have more to gain from public transport and therefore may be more likely to take an alternative option than city dwellers or the large centre dwellers. So the investment in rural and township public transport might be better than you have previously thought, as more people out of cars on the way to Christchurch means less congestion in Christchurch and more people that will use the city buses while they're in Christchurch. So that's pretty much what I've got to talk about. So if you've got any questions, I would welcome them. And thank you for listening.
Kia ora, Jade. Thank you. Any questions from the panel?
No. I'd previously written a note around what hybrid exploration had been done, and then you mentioned it in your submission. So I think, for us, and probably not necessarily a question for you, Jade, but it would be interesting for me and Neil and myself just to understand what considerations were done around the 87. Obviously, it's financial, but interesting if there's some other models that might work. So you would be interested to maybe have that information before we deliberate on the submissions. Thanks.
Yep, Neil.
Yeah, thanks, Jade, for your submission. Just have one question. In the bullet point 1, you say that we believe the ECAN numbers are incorrect and that ECAN are operating on faulty logic. So do you have different numbers, or have you presented those numbers in your submission?
Okay, so basically when we first put the petition out for signatories, we had identified that because of the way the bus was running, I actually know this from personal experience. I would catch the bus from Christchurch and then I would continue on the bus through to Lincoln, and then I would stay on the same bus, but I wouldn't swipe onto the next bus route. I would just stay on that bus and continue on to Southbridge. So I wouldn't have been counted. So when the bus counts went out initially, they actually underestimated the number of users because there were a bunch of people who did that. They caught the same bus with the same bus driver, stayed on the bus and then continued on, and then they weren't counted. So ECAN has worked to try and address that shortfall, and they have come up with it's not a perfect answer, but it does estimate how many people they think that they were missing. So they have addressed that since we put that petition forward. I think also key to that is that I'm not sure that the numbers represented also the need, the interest of people. So we've measured the number of people that were on the bus, but we haven't actually measured how many people wanted to use the bus, how many people were actually prevented from using the bus as well. So yeah, that was kind of like a way of sort of bringing that into people's mind as well, thinking about the numbers, what did they actually mean?
Thank you.
Kia ora, Jade. Kia ora, Neil and Nigel. Yeah, in terms of, and this is sort of a question for you, but also maybe for staff. In terms of the sort of other solutions, you've mentioned like a membership-based scheme, and I'm sure you're aware of the community vehicle trust sort of model that we have in other districts. Is there a community vehicle trust in and around Leaston, or?
So that's the one I mentioned. It's called Ellesmere Community Care, I believe, ECHO. Yeah. And so they do run a minibus, which you can hire. It's used by sports teams and groups within the community. It's a very good initiative. It's run, I've been to one of their meetings. In fact, I was thinking of volunteering to be on their board. But it basically, it relies on volunteer drivers, and it's not quite set up to be able to handle large volumes. They only have the one vehicle as far as I'm aware. So then you couldn't sort of run two vehicles going in opposite directions at the beginning of the day or something like that, for example. But that's the kind of thing that I think that we need, I think that's the kind of solution that should be, worked on, because obviously we've already got that structure set up. Maybe it just needs kind of maybe a separate kind of division within that, or something like that could then set up more buses or more minibuses. The other things that have occurred to me is that there are actually there's several pubs within the district that have their own little minibuses as well, and I wondered whether they would be amenable to a community type initiative where we make use of their minivans, and that's potentially advertising for them, that kind of thing. Ideas like that where the community actually get engaged and have benefits themselves, and everybody else benefits too, hopefully. But I think the issue with drivers is one that is a bit of a knotty problem, and that's where I'd be wanting to see leadership from ECAN to try and streamline that process, try and help to get something happening. That's one of the drawbacks for the Selwyn community bus. They have to pay a driver, they have to be charged the charter price for their bus, which means that it's more expensive, and I feel like there should be a better solution available to cover that. I don't know what it is, but I'd be happy to be part of a think tank on that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure of how the community vehicle trust system operates in terms of how do you increase funding or services for them, but that's definitely something maybe to look at, because it does feel like that is sort of a hybrid model that you might be looking at. The other thing I was wondering about is if there was a better bus service within Selwyn, so that connected, say, Leaston with Rolleston and stuff, and then that connected into town. Do you think that's a solution too?
I do, and that's a very good point that I didn't speak to, but I want to. I think where the city buses run a regular route, they run the same route and they run it sort of, to a timetable. I think our routes would be a little bit different. We wouldn't necessarily want to run the same route over and over. I think it would be more like maybe an alternating 2-hourly bus, one to Rolleston, one to Lincoln, one to Rolleston, one to Lincoln, and one to maybe Ashburton even, I'm not sure. And the other aspect is I think that should probably be interlaced with some shorter routes that link maybe Dunsandel, Leaston, Southbridge together and loop around the country as well, like the countryside. I know that doesn't match up very well with what people are used to when they're looking up a bus timetable for city buses, but I think that that's also what's needed. So, and it might be a little bit weird. It might be something like a country bus route that loops around quite like quite country roads, and then links with Rolleston, and maybe that is only once a week, for example. But then the other buses, the commuter buses, would go more frequently and link up with the centres in a more direct manner. So yeah, I think that it's more likely to meet users' needs, even though it's quite different from how city buses look. Yeah.
Thanks, Jade. Great answer. I don't think there's any other questions at the moment. So, hey, thanks for the time you've taken and all your work on
Thank you very much.
with your community and on the petition, etc. And thanks for presenting to us today. Thank you very much. Kia ora, Jade.
Thanks for having me, Craig.
All good. Thank
Cheers.
you.
See you.
Thank you. Have we found Chris? Yep. No, we haven't. Okay. Well, let's just adjourn for a few minutes and see if we are going to make contact with Chris. If not, we'll have to come to an end. But we'll just adjourn for a few minutes. All good. 10 minutes. Chris, if you are still going at about 9 minutes, we'll give you a little bell. Other than that, we'll ask you any questions or clarification that we have. So over to you. Floor is yours.
Okay. Kia ora, thank you. Chris Thomas, my name. I'm the manager at Age Concern South Canterbury, based in Timaru. And our organisation supports older people living in the community. And one of the biggest issues for older people is transport. When they have mobility issues, having good, reliable transport is such an important part of continuing to have a healthy and positive lifestyle. So I wanted to cover off a couple of things. Firstly, I would say that many of our clientele and the people we deal with use the My Way service in Timaru. So I'm just going to focus on South Canterbury. And that, for the most part, that is an excellent service, and they get very good, are very encouraged by the fact that it's relatively easy for them to use. I have suggested in my submission some areas that could be looked at to improve the service. And I know that these are things that I also talk to other ECAN staff about, so none of them should be really new. But anything that can be done to sort of increase the levels of service for our older clientele would be most appreciated. So the other things that I really wanted to talk about were the total mobility scheme for a start, and just to say again, this is an excellent service. We have many people who, for whatever reason, are not able to use the My Way service. Often it's because they're in rural communities and the service doesn't go there. But the total mobility service and the discounting of taxis is, again, a way that people can maintain their independence. Another aspect that I just want to briefly cover, and I didn't really do a lot of this in my submission, was just talk about the community vehicle trusts. Now, I'm in contact quite regularly with all of the community vehicle trusts that are based in South Canterbury to a greater or lesser extent, and they're all struggling with the fact that costs for operating those trusts have significantly increased, particularly vehicle running costs. I was out at Twizel last week, and that service there is, they are very, very remote, and that service there runs people sometimes, an 8-hour return trip if they're having to go to Twizel to Dunedin for a medical appointment or something like that, and then return to Twizel. And it's a huge cost for the trust to actually operate a vehicle, still volunteer drivers, for a day. And so that is just one example. But I mean, to give you a bit more specifics, their vehicles do 90 to 100,000 kilometres in a year. It's like that is a massive amount of travel, and I think they're quite unusual because of that. Other trusts wouldn't go anywhere near that amount, and so they really need to look at more support that could be given for those vehicle trusts. Now, I know that some of that comes, I'm not sure what the split is, but some of that comes from Whakakapi, and so I'm aware that there's a funding model, same with total mobility, where some of it comes from ECAN and some of it comes from Whakakapi. So I would just urge those trusts to be supported as much as you can. And in doing this, I also referenced some research that was done in Scotland, I don't think I've looked around and I haven't been able to find any research about the real benefits, measurable benefits associated with the community vehicle trusts. I know that they obviously provide a transport service for people who are in rural communities who don't have public transport. But to realise the actual tangible benefits that are given to those people, and there's some research done in Scotland. I'm just trying to sort of pull it up on my screen. So I know this is not New Zealand, but assuming that there's a sort of a similar sort of type of benefits, the benefit in Scotland, they spend £11.2 million on community transport, and there's something like a $2 billion return on investment in terms of things like reduced number of hip fractures, reduced number of medical appointments that were missed by older people, reduced visits to hospital, because the alternative for these community vehicle trusts rides is that people stay in their own home, and they stay in their own home in isolated communities, and they don't get the medical treatment or mental health treatment or other services that they need. So I'm just putting out a big urge that I think in the budgets that ECAN does for public transport, that adequate support is given to the My Way service in Timaru, to total mobility in the broadest sense, and to these community vehicle trusts. I think Canterbury is quite unique in the size and scale of the vehicle trusts. So thank you for the opportunity to talk. Is there anybody that'd like to ask a question?
Kia ora, Chris. Hey, thanks so much for your really thorough presentation and submission. Any questions, Nigel?
Just a point that you raised, Chris, Nige, how you doing? I think it's interesting, and we're just discussing around the mobility trust and the vehicle trusts. It is effectively target rate, and sometimes actually quite small on those communities. So I think there is an opportunity for us to have a discussion with some of those communities around what are their needs and what that looks like, potentially to increase the targeted rate part of the funding mechanism. So I think that yes, you've highlighted some really good points that I think we need to take forward to offer back to those trusts to help the sustainability if they're under pressure as far as financing.
Yeah, and I mean it's just, and again, just going back to example of Twizel, they have to replace their vehicles every 12 or 18 months. That's a substantial investment, and at the moment they're operating on a day-to-day basis at a loss, and so being able to actually fund replacement vehicles is a significant challenge, sort of thing. So yeah.
Thanks, Chris. Any other questions, Nigel? Any from you? Hey, Chris, I just really wanted to acknowledge all those really great ideas that you put in the front of your submission about the My Way improvements. I think there's a lot of really good ideas that could be considered in there, so thank you for that. And likewise, the support you've shown for My Way, total mobility services, the Super Gold and the Community Services Card discounts, the PT customer charter, and the national ticketing service stuff. So thank you for that support. But of course, note your sort of plea for increased funding for community vehicle trusts like Nigel just talked about, and for those total mobility agencies like you've noted. So I don't have any questions because you've spelt it out so clearly that it's really obvious what you would like to see. So we can consider that as part of our deliberations when we get to it. So thank you, Chris. I don't have any others questions. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for the opportunity. Okay. All right.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay.
Keep up the good
Cheers.
work.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Cool. So I think that's our last submitter. We did have a couple of others, but they weren't available today. So that's brought us to the end of the submitters. So according to me, we will go that our next meeting is going to be on Monday the 9th of December to deliberate on the submissions, and that's our next meeting, and that'll close our meeting. It's 12:56, so just before 1 o'clock. And I'll just do karakia to finish our meeting, and we'll reconvene on the 9th of December. So he karakia whakamutunga o tātou nei hui. Unuhia ki turu tapu nui o tāne, kia wātea, kia māma, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua i te ara takatū, koe e rā e rongo, whakiiri aki ki runga, kia tīna, haumi e hui e, tāia ki e. Kia ora koutou, and thanks to the panel.